International development in the current context, most of the funding comes from the US government in some way. They're the biggest donor, so to speak. So you have the US Agency for International Development. It's an independent agency in the US government. Their budget is between $30 and $40 billion a year. Most of that goes to implementing partners. USAID doesn't do any work themselves. So they do both contracts and grants and cooperative agreements. There's lots of different funding mechanisms. But the crux of it is that nonprofits have a big portion of it through things like Food for Peace, Food for Education, Food for Progress. Also, US Department of Agriculture will fund a lot of this work. And then you've got a lot of money going to USAID contractors. And those contracts can run into the billions of dollars. So for example, there's a global supply chain project funded by USAID that's like $9 billion. That got awarded to Chemonics a few years ago. So that's moving antiretroviral drugs and other kinds of pharmaceutical items around the world, to clinics to support, vulnerable people, maternal child health, that kind of thing. But then you've got all kinds of projects funded by USAID, like doing maternal child health, education, community stabilization, infrastructure, water, sanitation, hygiene. There's so many agriculture projects around the world. So you've got like value chain projects, you've got economic development, livelihoods especially, and then you've got a continuum too. You've got emergency funding, and then you've got emergency stabilization, relief type stuff, and then you've got long-term development. So at every part along the continuum, there's different kinds of jobs. You could be a humanitarian working in humanitarian response, where you're being deployed right after an emergency like an earthquake or a giant natural disaster, or a complex disaster like the Iraq War was, or Syria or Ukraine or something like that. And then you've got long-term development projects in chronically poor in vulnerable places where they may not make the headlines, but they're just chronically poor, underdeveloped, lots of worrying indicators about things like maternal child health, education, stuff like that.